What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Dime here on Monday. I see the whole crew already in here in the chat, so appreciate all you guys. And yeah, let's have a big week, Zach. I've been cold here in the underdog streets, and it's so funny because it always coincides with number one. My Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, so we got that going for us. And then big DFS weeks on the PGA side, both round 3 and round 4. Showdown went really well for me, and then also yesterday in football, get a really nice main slate, a nice Eagles showdown. I just built 5 Eagles, 1 Commander. My Eagles come through there, but need to get back in stride here on the underdog side. And so I know that you have a bunch that you like here on the NBA side. So let's jump right in.
Yeah, and Friday and Saturday in the underdog streets actually did go well for me, especially with that Nick Richards double prop coming through for us on Saturday. I had that in at 1.61x. I think by the time I gave it out in the chat later on in the morning, it was 1.49, but that really helped out. So the number in the account higher than it was to start Friday. 2 consecutive days of wins. Obviously took yesterday off with just the single NBA game. Double-digit games on this slate, and I mentioned the Nick Richards prop. Let's start there, Alex, because Nick Richards double-double today is at 1.37x here on Underdog. So obviously a lower multiplier than it was when we went to it on Saturday morning, but I still think this is extremely strong. Let's talk about why. First of all, in the projection model, we've got him for 12.5 points. And 10.3 rebounds. So we haven't projected as a median outcome here for a double-double. Now, this is far from the matchup we saw the other day. We're taking on the Clippers here tonight. Clippers are 2-point road favorites, healthy 225 implied total. Richards has, and again, right, like just came over in the trade from Charlotte. So I want to loop in some of the Charlotte game logs here just for Richards as in terms of just a statistical asset. He started 12 games this season between the Hornets and the Suns. He's got a double-double in 5 of those 12. So I think we get much stronger when we look just in the Phoenix games. And then instead of looking at the starts, we look at the games where he's gotten to a certain minutes threshold, because you think back to some of those Charlotte starts, while he produced just fine in his minutes, like 3 of those starts they lost by 25 because it was the Hornets, right? So he didn't get to full minutes. 4 games so far with Phoenix. He's double-doubled in 2 of those 4. He missed 1 by just 2 points where he had 8 and 15 rebounds in just 22 minutes against Brooklyn. In these close games with Phoenix, obviously he's already taken over the starting role. In these close games, he's playing between 28 and 32. I think that's what we should expect going forward. This game is a 2-point spread. And so I mentioned that minutes threshold. You know, I like to set the arbitrary threshold here to fit my narrative, but I think this one is pretty telling. He's played 25 or more minutes in 9 of his 25 appearances this year between the Hornets and the Suns. In those 9 games where he played 25 or more minutes, he's got 7 double-doubles. So again, that combined with the 1.37x multiplier here, this might be my favorite play on the board, but we got to talk about Daniel Gafford here in a second.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes when you say I'm setting an arbitrary minutes like restriction, it is arbitrary. This doesn't seem anywhere near as arbitrary. So I think this is really strong. And another way you can do it is just extrapolate his per 21.9 averages, which is what he's averaged so far this season, into where we expect him to be. And I really like the fact that like anybody who's just looking at his average production now on his new team, or his average minutes per game, isn't going to notice that both times he played 22 minutes, there was a massive blowout. So as you said, it looks like he's locked into, let's say 29 to 32, something like that in close games, maybe more. I mean, he played 34 against Washington. It does seem like the expectation, it almost feels like we are actually under projecting him, even though we're projecting him at a double-double. So I think I'm with you on this one being a really, really strong multiplier. Don't know for sure that I'm going to be using it just because I'm still in the mindset of I want to stick to the things that I know I do really well, which is the stocks and the free throws made. But I may even break that here because this one's so strong and you found it. So it doesn't matter if I'm good at finding double-doubles. You're the one who found this one. So I can just kind of blindly follow you there as well. Where you want to go next?
Let's talk Daniel Gafford. Maybe I can convince you that this is the best prop on the board so far. I'm looking at his PRA here, and it's set at 28.5. I want to ignore that. 29.5 is 1.11x, and I think this is even stronger than what the model is projecting here, because we've got him projected right around 30 PRA here tonight against the Wizards. I'm leaning into that matchup, and I'm leaning into the noggin model because there is no Derek Lively, there is no Maxi Kleber, and there is no Dwight Powell. So PJ Washington at the 5, sure. Markieff Morris, probably not until or unless they are up by 20, 25 plus late in the game. So I think we are pretty safe for massive Gafford minutes here, barring foul trouble or injury. And then talking about the matchup too, since, like, keep in mind, since being traded to Dallas from Washington, he's played the Wizards twice. Last February, right after the trade, 16 points, 17 boards, 2 assists, 7 stocks. So if we get fantasy score props here too, I will probably be looking for a higher than selection, because 16 points, 17 boards, 2 assists, 7 stocks, 24 minutes. Then this season on December 5th, 16 points, 7 boards, an assist, and 2 blocks, 19 minutes. I think we get 30, maybe even more minutes out of Daniel Gafford here tonight. 5 games this season of 30 or more minutes for Daniel Gafford. PRA totals of 36, 28, 49, 41, and 26 for an average of 36 across those 5 games. So I'm good to ladder this one for sure to 34.5 for 1.87x. I think 39.5 is also in play with the 4.21x multiplier. We've seen him go over that PRA number twice in those 5 games that he's got 30 minutes or more this season. And I do have an entry in with the 45.5 or 44.5 rather at 10.84x. When you're putting that in there with any of those ladders with the Richards double and some of these other picks that I'm going to talk about here, we got some big time upside here with this Gafford ladder. How are you feeling about this?
I think it makes sense because Washington is a massive boost to opposing centers in points, rebounds, and assists, like 15%, 20%, 25% in those 3 across the board. So you are getting the absolute nuts matchup, and you get the added minutes for a guy who already produces a bunch, and you get a little bit of a narrative mixed in there. So it all does sound good to me for sure.
Well, and I do want to point out too, like looking at the stocks and the steals and blocks boards, Gafford 2.5 blocks for 1.22x also feels very strong. We've got him projected for a hair over 3 blocks here this morning. We went to the 2.5 stocks the other night in his start, went over that. So I like the PRA ladder a little bit more, but you can also work in those Gafford blocks. I had one that I did have in entries, but is now no longer on the board because my theory behind the D'Angelo Russell play at 16.5 points was Ben Simmons is questionable with the back. He's probably not going to play through that because his back is toast at this point, it appears. We already had D'Lo projected for almost 19 points in the model over the 16.5 number in 5 of 8 games. But again, that he is now down because that Simmons news hit right before the stream. So let's go to old reliable, my old friend DeJounte Murray. I will note right off the top, 1.5 steals is very, very strong again. I lean, once again, when we have these 2 props presented to us by Underdog, I'm leaning towards the over 1.5 first quarter rebounds. We have the Pelicans tonight in a good matchup on the road, taking on the Raptors, 233.5 implied total in that one, with the Pelicans 2.5 point road favorites. Questionable tags on the other side for Jakob Poeltl, for Kelly Olynyk. So you could be seeing like Bruno Fernando, Jonathan Mobo, Chris Boucher, right? Which is, you're not nervous about this matchup in the first place, but it would be even better on the glass in that case. And DeJounte, again, this is just, if anything, chasing the game logs this season. He's over this number in 20 of his 28 first quarters this season. And Zion's going to play here tonight. He is still over this number in 3 of 4 games with Zion. It's crazy. Just it highlights how injury plagued this team has been this year, that those 2 guys have only played 4 games together. And there's only 2 first quarters this season where DeJounte played less than 8 minutes in a first quarter. One of them was coming back from the fractured hand. So I really like the DeJounte 1.5 first quarter rebounds prop at the 1x multiplier. Typically, we're getting this at like a 0.92 or something like that. So I lean towards this compared to the steals, but I think the steals is also an attractive option where we haven't projected north of 2 steals in the model.
Yeah, if you remember in that last game, it was the lowest steals projection we've seen for him in quite some time at like 2.04. It is back to 2.22, which is not as high as it's been a lot of the time that we have taken this over 1.5 steals. So it's good. The first quarter might be better. I may be flipping on this now. When we first started having this debate of like, do we go to the first quarter rebounds or do we go to the 1.5 steals? In that time, his steals projection was usually 2.4 to 2.7. Not this 2.22 number. So I could definitely be talked into the first quarter rebounds instead. Toronto is a good steals matchup overall, but maybe not necessarily for the point guard position. So you also have that factoring in. Where else do you want to go on the stock side? I know you have a few others.
Yeah, I've got 2 more. Let's go back to a guy you were talking about last week, and he didn't come through for us in that game against Golden State, but I think what you talked about that day kind of stays here with Lonzo Ball tonight against Denver. 1.5 steals is 1.11x here tonight for Lonzo Ball, and we know that like midway through the afternoon, I think that was Thursday of last week, if I recall correctly, but like that steals number came down and it never came back, right? And I think that's indicative of a lot of the field here on Underdog being on that prop just like we were. So Denver's giving a 19.6% boost to opposing point guards in the steals category. We've got Lonzo projected for 1.91 here. So not my favorite pick on the day, but I think a strong enough secondary option to put into some of these potential 6-pick plays we could be building here.
Yeah, and actually in that game, he got a steal in the first minute and then didn't have another one against Golden State. So, but he's still racking up a bunch of steals. His last, or let's just go through his January games: 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, 0, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3 for steals. So he has been a steals machine. And remember, like he's played 20.7 minutes per game so far this season. Now it seems like he's more locked into 23 to 26. This could start to expand even more. My guess is it stays right in line with that. But that means we're talking about a guy who's averaging 1 point steals in 20.7 minutes, pretty locked into an extra, let's say 5 minutes from there. And that steals projection, we might even be a little bit low on it. So I do think this one's strong too.
Well, I see a couple questions from P. Mike from Preston in the chat, and I do want to discuss those props that they've brought up here. But let me talk about my guy, Amen Thompson, here real quick. I think there are also 2 props we can go to with Amen with some confidence here. And first, the double-double, as long as that's still up there. Yeah, just at the 1x multiplier. And look, it took him a couple weeks to catch up to us on this Amen prop, but now we are here. And 12 games this season of Amen Thompson with 36 or more minutes. We have him projected for 38. He's got double-doubles in 9 of those 12 games with 36 minutes or more. But I also think you see that 2.5 stocks number, 1.07x, 12 games of 36 minutes or more, 9 times he's gone over this number. So I lean towards the stocks for the extra little cookie. We don't necessarily need that extra multiplier considering some of the other props we have here. And if you're taking the Gafford up, I do think the double-double is probably, it feels slightly more comfortable to me. But again, I think both of those are very strong. So do you have a lean? I imagine you like the stocks here.
I think I like the stocks a little more just based on the matchup with Boston. He's gone over this number of stocks in 6 consecutive games, 7 of the last 8. I like the fact that you're not locked into one of stocks or blocks, that you're getting the combination. He is among like the most diverse in the way that he gets there on stocks, where he might have one game where he goes 4 steals, no blocks, and then the next game it's 3 blocks, no steals. Like you don't get that from any guy. So I do like this one for sure at the 1.07x. I think if they were dead even, if they were both just the standard 1.0, then I might lean the double-double. But since we're getting a bit of a payout boost here, I think I'll go stocks.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I saw P. Mike in here talking about some of the Miami guys. Jimmy Butler's supposed to return from suspension tonight. He's asking about his lower than 22.5 PRA. Same on Duncan Robinson. That PRA number is set at 17.5. To be honest, I'm kind of staying away from Miami right now, not just in the props, but on the DFS side as well, because that game environment just looks horrendous. 209.5 implied total here with the
Mhm.
Magic in town, the Battle of Florida here, as it were. Orlando 1.5 point road favorites. There's just a lot of uncertainty, not just with Jimmy Butler and his role. How many minutes is he going to play? How hard is he going to play? Like, that is a true wild card to me here today with more than 10 games on the slate. I don't feel like I need to try to guess how Jimmy's going to come out there and play tonight. And Jaime Jaquez is now questionable, I believe, with an illness. So like Duncan Robinson lower than 17.5. I might have had a little bit more interest in that with Jimmy coming back if Jaime didn't go questionable here. Just with the uncertainty surrounding that entire rotation, that pretty much that whole game is a stay away for me at the moment. But then Preston was asking about Vit Krejci laddering his points to 12.5 for 1.49x, 14.5 points for 2.14x. I don't hate that. We don't have a huge sample size with Trae Young off, and Trae Young is going to miss tonight's game front end of the back-to-back here for Atlanta. They also don't have Jalen Johnson in this one. So, like, if this, that's why we're talking about somebody like Vit Krejci here. In the two games that we've missed Trae this season, 7 and 11 points for Krejci, respectively. Now, that first game against Memphis, only 20 minutes in this one. We're expecting him to get into the upper 20s here, but I don't think this is where I want to, like, I'm hoping that we get some Keaton Wallace props because I know Keaton Wallace is going to be in my life in the DFS streets, especially if he starts here tonight. So, like, I don't know, man. We've got Krejci projected for less than 10 points. And it's not like we're ignoring his minutes. He's at a 28-minute projection here. So I don't know. What do you think here? It's a tough matchup against Minnesota. They're double-digit road dogs, unsurprisingly, with no Trae and no Jalen. And just a 217.5 implied total. What do you think about Vit Krejci?
I think I'm mostly with you there. What I would say is the only one that I'd be remotely interested in is the 14.5, the 2.14x. I think you lean into the wider range of outcomes here. I don't like the standard. I don't like the 1.5x. Once you get to 2x, like maybe there's an argument for it, but definitely not my favorite. I think I'm with you there. There is one other stocks pick that I want to ask you about, and that is Jaren Jackson Jr., 2.5 for 1.05x. Now, the model does not like it. Our model only has him projected for 2.52 stocks. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, do you think that this is purely driven by the matchup? Because for most of the season, most of the last couple of weeks at the very least, we've had Jaren projected for like 3.2 to 3.5 stocks. Sometimes we're even seeing him at 3.7, something like that. And at 2.5 stocks, most of the time that they actually give us this pick, if he's not listed at 3.5, it's 2.5 at like 0.8x, 0.76x, something like that. So suddenly it going all the way to 1.05. Yes, New York allows the second fewest steals per game, but they're pretty middle of the road in blocks, and that's typically how Jaren's going to get there. So the gut reaction for me here is that there's value here, even though we're not projecting any. What are your thoughts on Jaren here?
I think it's an interesting one to talk about, like thinking about the matchup. I'm not sure we've had these two teams face off yet this season, but like I could see Jaren sliding to the 5, and that's where the opposing front courts have really been hurt with the stocks props, which makes sense if you're being pulled out to the perimeter to guard Cat more often than not. We should get Santi Aldama back. He's still questionable tonight, recovering from that illness. But like, if he comes back into this rotation, it gives them another body to be able to slide Triple J to the 5 and play a little bit smaller. Like, it doesn't feel like a great idea to me to run Edey out there for big minutes tonight against this Knicks team. So I'm a little bit hesitant just because, like you mentioned, like the matchup against the Knicks for opposing centers has not been great for stocks, but that is the reason why we're getting this plus 1x multiplier on Triple J. Like it feels like over a month since we had a plus 1 multiplier on 2.5 stocks for Triple J. So like, I don't hate it, but this would be like, if we're running a 6 pick and we have like 7 or 8 picks, like this would be one of those rotational options for me rather than one of the core pieces that we're keeping in.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think one thing that I'm going to take some extra time to look into here, because it's potentially so valuable is I want to see how Jaren's typical rotations line up with Towns' typical rotations, because I think you nailed it. I think the reason why they've been such a bad stocks matchup, particularly for centers, is that Cat pulls them away from the basket. So the more minutes that we can expect for Jaren to be on the floor without Cat, I think the better chance he has of getting this. And so if by some chance the rotations mean that, hey, you know what, maybe Jaren's going to get more minutes than expected without Cat on the floor, then I think we could potentially find a lot of value here. But I think most likely it's just not the matchup for it. We also have our guy Dyson Daniels 3.5 here in a decent matchup with Minnesota at 1.13x. Any thoughts there? We've got him projected above this number, but not way above. We have him at 3.83. So purely by the numbers, I don't think there's any value there.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first guys I looked at here because I saw Dyson Daniels pop up on the stocks board. I just fired this as a 6 pick. D'Angelo Russell got reposted at the same 16.5 number, and I will take that here tonight, even in a game where, again, they're rightfully significant underdogs here against Sacramento. Like, one thing I didn't mention, I think sometimes you got to factor in the rhetoric of these players, like hearkening back. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but like the game after Anthony Edwards said, I hate being out there passing and getting double teamed. Like maybe we should have taken a look at his points overs. D'Angelo Russell made comments the other day saying, I will never take being able to play this free style of basketball, take it for granted again. So this guy is out there having a lot of fun on a team where it doesn't matter if they win or lose. If he can go out there and score 20 plus points and like make these games not 40-point losses, right, for the Nets as they continue to ramp up the tank here, like he gets to do what he wants here, especially with Ben Simmons out, upper 20s in minutes with D'Lo with no Ben Simmons. I will take the higher than 16.5 points here.
Yeah, I like that. Let's do a quick recap of these 6, and then I've got to share. I don't know if you saw the Twitter exchange between Brunson and Josh Hart last night. Did you see that?
Was it something about somebody's got to play defense or something like that?
Okay, yeah. So we'll show this real quick. So recap here. We've got Nick Richards, double-double, 1.37x. Daniel Gafford over his 28.5 PRA. DeJounte Murray over 1.5 first quarter rebounds. Lonzo Ball over 1.5 steals. Amen Thompson over 2.5 stocks. And D'Angelo Russell over 16.5 points. We did discuss a few others. I'm not going to have my picks finalized until we get some free throws made props, which, by the way, we didn't get at all the other day. So hopefully that
2 days in a row.
Yeah, hopefully that was a one-off, and they will be back now that we have such a large slate once again. But I'm a little bit worried because I love those, and we've been absolutely hammering them. So maybe not enough people are playing them, and they're just getting beat by us on free throws made props. So they've been a little bit afraid to post them, but hopefully they will continue to post those. And once they do, I will post my picks in the channel. Obviously, this pick already done for you guys, and Zach will post his as well in the Pick'em Discord. All right, let me show you this. So first, you have to understand Brunson is a huge Eagles fan. Josh Hart is a big Commanders fan, and so we had Brunson notice that Josh Hart had left the stadium early, so he tweets that, and then Josh Hart replies with, have to go home so I can sleep. One of us has to play defense tomorrow, talking about their game, which is just a phenomenal response. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And given the fact that we are an NBA show, had to point that out. And those guys just, as a Sixers fan, like I don't want to give compliments to the Knicks, but man, right, it seems like they've got the kind of locker room that you want to have. And obviously these two guys are at the forefront of that.
Yeah, no question about that, man. That's great. Fantastic content, Josh Hart.
Really is. Really is. You want to go through some ownership stuff for tonight?
Yeah, let's take a look at what we've got here. We have an update up on here. We do. Perfect. Okay. Well, I can start just talking about the Hawks here real quick. Like I mentioned, Trae Young ruled out. No Jalen Johnson here. So we actually have Q tags on there. Let me pull up the 12:30 here. That is the 11:30 just to make sure that I'm not missing anything important here. Looking at the lengthy injury report here today. Okay, so good thing I pulled this up. Keaton Wallace, Dominic Barlow, Mohamed Gay, all available here from the G League. Again, no Trae Young, no Jalen Johnson. It looks like they left Daquan Plowden down. We've got Q tags on Larry Nance, on Zachary Chaché, and DeAndre Hunter. So this could be almost a total G League game here for the Hawks, and Keaton Wallace is the guy. If he starts, this is a player that would profile as a 100% play for me in my 20 max builds on DraftKings. I believe still sub 4K or low 4Ks over there on FanDuel as well. Even in a tough matchup, like Keaton Wallace is somebody you want to get into your lineups. The guy can hoop and put up the stats, and that's what we're concerned with on the DFS side of things. Unsurprised to see Daniel Gafford as the highest owned player here, 35%, 6,700. All the things I said when we're attacking his props, like he has nobody behind him to take these minutes and one of the best matchups in the league. So I think that is good chalk. And I would be going against the model here in terms of that negative GPP score that he's carrying. I'm fine playing Daniel Gafford chalk in this spot.
The last time we saw Keaton Wallace at the NBA level was on the 15th of January, 27, 6, and 6, 4 steals, only 1 turnover. He was efficient from the floor. Like you said, he can hoop. Now that was against Chicago, so a little bit of grain of salt, but obviously from a fantasy points per minute perspective, hard to beat that at that price tag.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different matchup, of course, but like one thing when you look at some of these two-way guys that come up to the league for a game or two, like looking at their G League stats again is not a one-to-one comparison. It's not the only thing that you should consider. But Keaton Wallace at the G League level, okay, here we go. 11 games of the regular season, 33 minutes a game, 17 points, 5.5 boards, 5.5 assists, 2 stocks per game, right? This is a fantasy point per minute type of a player at the G League level. So even if you project him for slightly below that at the NBA level tonight in this matchup against Minnesota, he's like 3,800. Like, give me Keaton Wallace. So you also sort by GPP scores there a minute ago. I saw at the top D'Angelo Russell, which again makes some sense to me here. That ownership number will come up now at 6,400 with no Ben Simmons, but I think he is worth it because his ownership probably doesn't go through the roof because the minutes projection is not going to go north of 30, I would think. I certainly wouldn't put it there because the Nets stink. They're running more of a flat rotation. So, like, we should still expect upper 20s in minutes here. And that has proven in a small sample size to be more than what D'Angelo Russell needs to get on top of a $6,400 price tag. So, like, is he going to be my highest owned player? No. But I do think that the motto is onto something, kind of highlighting him there as a great tournament play right now, especially just because that 1% ownership. So that number will move around. You see a couple other guys here. Onyeka Okongwu, 6,400. I get it. Probably not going overboard on him today, but neither is the field. 4% projected own. And when you have such a big slate like this, right, the ownership does get leveled out a little bit. So you see with the value that we expect to have and some that we already have, yeah, Denver against Chicago makes sense. Jokic, 31%, even at 12K. Yeah, give me some of that. Jamal Murray, 7,200 against Chicago. Yeah, give me some of that, right? Russell Westbrook at 6,200 minutes, trending down a little bit, but like that's one of the best spots in terms of a fantasy environment here today because Nuggets hosting the Bulls, or no, on the road against the Bulls, but they're 9.5 point favorites, 248 implied total. So get your Nuggets. I think that is also some good chalk. Like some other notes, like from a matchup perspective, Knicks taking on the Grizzlies here. That is a pace-up matchup. Not every day that you get the Knicks in a 241.5 implied total and a 3.5 point spread. So like pretty much all of the Knicks starters I'm fine with getting to here. On the other side, very, very tough to get to Memphis. So it's probably just Knicks shares for me there in that one. We talked about Gafford, right? But like you can get to these other Dallas guys here against Washington, and that is the lone 8:30 game there on DraftKings. So like if we get some other, like we already don't have the front court guys, we already don't have Luka. Najee Marshall is also out for this team. So right, like Kyrie at 8,900, I think at 86 over on FanDuel can absolutely get there. PJ Washington sub 7K on both sides, you can get there. Like don't let the love for Daniel Gafford, which I think again rightfully so, don't let that make you ignore the rest of this team who also are in a great matchup. We could totally see, right? We had Klay Thompson the other day on a minutes restriction here. So like Omax Prosper is picking up 5.5% ownership here. And that does make some sense to me at power forward only, but still 3,100. The rest of this Dallas team also looks good. And then one other note, we had Tobias Harris questionable. He left early last game. Was at shoot around, but it's a head injury. So I'm a little bit confused why he's questionable. He's either in the concussion protocol or he's not. So I lean that Tobias Harris plays here since he was at shoot around. 5,800. I don't have much interest in that Pistons team against Cleveland if he plays, but if he sits, we saw Oscar Thompson get to 30 minutes last game. So if Tobias Harris did end up sitting here tonight, 4,800 for Oscar, I would have some interest there just as a minutes play because just like his brother, he can contribute across the box score. Not quite to Amon's level, but still somebody we should have interest in if that came to pass.
One thing I want to mention here on the Dallas side, just kind of a larger, almost strategy point of view on the GPP scores particularly. When you see a team like this that has a bunch of chalky players and a lot of the chalky guys are negative GPP scores, I do think you can lean into that chalk a little bit more than usual because you know that each kind of chalky piece is still leveraging the other chalky pieces. So for example, I think the most obvious way to look at this is, let's say Gafford became 45% and Kyrie went down to 10 to 15. Kyrie might still have a slightly negative GPP score, but if suddenly you feel like Gafford is now worth leveraging and you want to fade Gafford, the chances that Gafford fails, obviously not great. Look at this, just a 9% fail rate for Gafford. Mm-hmm. But one of the ways he fails is that Kyrie goes off and Kyrie's having one of his games where nobody else is touching the ball because Kyrie's putting up 45, 50 points, something like that. Now you're using the GPP scores to inform your decision still, but you're just doing that in a slightly different way. So you're saying, okay, Gafford's more over-owned. I will go to the slightly over-owned Kyrie, knowing that when he really hits, now I'm at least leveraging this other chalky piece. Or maybe ownership stays the exact same way as it is right now, and you say, I want Gafford to have a big game, and if he does, 20% PJ Washington might fail, 20% Kyrie Irving might fail. So to your point, earlier, where you don't really care about the GPP scores because Gafford looks so good tonight. Mm-hmm. I think the GPP scores actually agree with you there because you still are getting some roster construction positive element out of that play.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. When I was kind of perusing some of the other spend up options here, some of the other options that are getting highlighted by tournament scores, we talked about the Knicks. Towns has the highest GPP score. I think I agree there, especially with how much ownership is going to 12K Jokic. $9,800 for Towns in this game with the 241.5 implied total at home. Mm-hmm. That certainly does make some sense. I think too, Charlotte and the Lakers in one of the early games here tonight, if you want to get some LaMelo or some Anthony Davis at single digit ownership, those both make some sense to me here. So looking like you can actually differentiate. Maybe I'm loading up on some of the very chalky value that I think will be very chalky by the time we get to lock, and then differentiating in my MME build with some of these spend ups and trying to get leverage on the field with a Towns, with an Anthony Davis and the like.
Yeah. The only other thing that stands out to me here is that one of the guys who has a really good GPP score, thanks to this quite good ceiling, is Zach LaVine at just $8,100. So maybe what you do up top is you say, all right, maybe I'll play two guys like a Towns and somebody else, or I will lean into the Jokic chalk, but I'm going to do so by turning it into a bit of a game stack with Zach LaVine, who appears to be under-owned here according to our projection. So lots of ways to approach this slate, it seems.
The last thing I wanted to touch on there was P. Mike's question saying Jalen Wilson lower than 20.5 PRA. So our projection's not updated for Simmons being out quite yet. On the surface, that is something that interests me a little bit here, P. Mike. But I think that's probably going to come out as being a stay away if we're just looking at the projections once we get these minutes updated, because Jalen Wilson's going to go from low to mid 20s in minutes to certainly upper 20s here, probably 28, 29, something like that. So it's a stay away from me here. On paper, I would agree that I lean towards the lower side there, but
how do you think it correlates with the Russell over 16.5? And would the correlation maybe make you want to just go to the under 12.5 points instead of the PRA?
Potentially. I I think it's going to correlate well because D-Lo's not a huge fan of passing the ball. Although his potential assists in his first few games with the Nets were great here. 8 games along.
Which is why I kind of think if you're going to take an under on Wilson and you have Russell already in at over 16.5 points, you probably want to just go to the under 12.5 points, right? Because one of the ways that Russell fails to hit the 16.5 points is he has a playmaking game where he's just dishing out a bunch of assists, which would obviously help Wilson's points, but then you don't care. You want the game where Russell's keeping the ball himself. He's putting up his own shots.
Yeah, so 8 games that those two guys have played together so far since D'Lo came over in the trade. It looks like he's under this PRA number in 7 of those 8, but also under the points number in 6 of the 8. And the one game that he went over the PRA number was actually the last time out against Miami. He got 36 minutes, 12 points, 9 boards, 8 assists. So I think I'm fine with either, but I think you make a good point about the points only being more correlated there if you're pairing it with D'Angelo Russell in any of your entries.
Cool. Anything else today?
I think that's it for me right now, man. Again, I know you're going to hit those free throw props. I'll be all over the fantasy score props when we get those posted as well. So anything else that we find, we'll be posting to our subscribers there in the chat. And one other thing that I wanted to mention here, if you aren't a subscriber quite yet, right? Promo code right now is live, early 15. It's all one word, gets you 15% off annual plans, right? So like thinking about NFL seasons coming to an end here, but we've got the Super Bowl coming up. If you want to come check out what we've got on the, behind the paywall here at FTN Fantasy, use that promo code early15 for 15% off any of these annual plans. That means you're buying into next season's football content here at FTN Fantasy as well. And you'll get the next 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. So if you haven't come to join us here yet, promo code early15 for that discount. Is an easy way to get in here and get set for next season, man. Because I saw, dude, we've got the best ball content rolling out already. And again, that 15% off, I think there are multiple plans that you can apply that to. So you check out the pricing page here at FTN Fantasy to see the differences between all of those plans.
And it also means you get the full PGA season. Signature events now underway this season, starting at Pebble Beach. You can see got a great field. Scotty Scheffler's back from a freak hand injury. And we started 67% on the PGA plays last week. Hopefully we get plenty of options on the board this week for such a big event. It's that time of year, right? We're turning the page on NFL. 1 game left. Yes, my Eagles are still part of that 1 game, but it's NBA season, it's PGA season, and we're gonna have a blast doing all of it.
One note before we sign off here, Amin Thompson's stocks is now 1x multiplier on Underdog. So that and the double-double, still good. I think Alex and I still both lean towards the stocks, even though they're both the same multiplier now. But getting Amin Thompson, it's been going well for us. Hopefully it goes well for us again here on Monday.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we will have all of the picks updated, all of the plays updated in the Discord once we've got them. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you tomorrow.